And I will say there's probably nothing more confusing really to think about than dividing by fractions. But if we think about it, why don't you take out your little bag of fraction manipulatives just so you can see these things here. One half. It's always good when you think of fractions to actually think about whole numbers a little bit, because whole numbers we can deal with, fractions get a little goofy for us. So if I had 10 divided by 5, we all know the answer is 2, correct? Okay. And what you're looking for is this: how many 5s can you take out of 10? Well, that's where kind of the number 2 comes from. Well, if you translate that into the fraction thing, and if I start with 1/2, and I ask you how many 1/8 can you take out of a half, or how many 1/8 are in 1/2, if you look at your fraction circle, your half fraction circle, which looks like this, how many of the 1/8 pieces does it take to make up that 1/2? If you look at your 1/8 pieces, anybody? I'm going to guess it's going to look a little like this. How many 1/8 pieces is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's kind of the confusing thing, is because you can divide a fraction by a fraction and actually get a whole number, which we don't think of. We always think anytime you divide a couple of things, you always get a number smaller than you start with because of whole numbers. But in fractions, if you're dividing by something smaller than 1, you can get a lot more things. Here's another example. We won't do it. Just, if you have 10 pizzas and you divide them all into 1/8 pieces, what is 10 divided by 1/8? Or how many pieces will you have? If you take 10 pizzas and cut them all up into 1/8 slices, how many pieces of pizza will you have at the end of all that, Amy? Negative. Here, let me give you the visual. Here's just one pizza, right? I cut it into 1/8 pieces. That's just one. How many pieces will I get from one pizza? 8. From the second pizza, I do the same thing. Cut it into 1/8 pieces. How many pieces am I going to get? 8. If I have 10 pizzas and I do that, I take 10 and cut it all into 1/8 pieces. How many 1/8 pieces, 1/8 of a slice pizza pieces am I going to have? Is it up?
80.
80 of them. Which again, is kind of boggles our minds, because we always think with division you get a smaller number. But when you divide by a fraction, okay, you actually end up, when you divide by something smaller than 1, usually you're going to end up with something big on the end. It's just kind of the way it works. But now we're just looking at fractions. Let's try an easy one. Let's talk in terms of money. If I had a $0.50 and I asked you how many quarters, 1/4 of a dollar, are in a $0.50, you could probably think about that. How many quarters does it take to make a $0.50 Lance? 2. Okay, which is if you took your little pie pieces, you're a half right there. How many quarters does it take to make a half? There's a quarter here and a quarter there. How many pieces is that? 2. Now, what if I flip that around for those of you that are geniuses? What if I started with a quarter and asked you to cut that into halves? How many 1/2 pieces are in a quarter? See, it gets a little, by the way, by the time we're all done, I'll give you a little simple little thing to do this easily without thinking about it, but you might be able to figure this out. So here's the deal. I'm starting with a quarter of a circle. Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm starting with a quarter of a circle, and I want to know how many halves I will get out of that quarter. how many halves, well, let me tell you, it's gotta be less than one, because I can't take a whole half out of it. But what part of a half can I take out of it? Elijah?
Negative one.
No, we're not in negatives. Maggie? No, I don't know where that came from, but it is not a point. Do I want a fraction here? Keith?
1/2.
You do. You take a quarter and divide it into halves, you get a half, because you can only take, okay, you can only take, if you're taking a quarter, dividing it by 1/2, this quarter only makes up half of what you're wanting to divide it by, so you only end up with a half. Just like if I took 5 and divided it by 10, how many 10s can I take out of 5? I can't, can I? I can't take 1, but I can take 5 and divide it by 10. What do I get? You get 1/2. 5 divided by 10 is 1/2. I can't take a whole 10 out of 5, but I can take half of it out of it. And you can see why fractions most people don't want to work with. Let's look at another one. Oh, they do give some whole numbers here. What about, how about this? 1 divided by 1/3. How many 1/3s, again, go back to the pizza. If you have one whole pizza, cut it into 1/3 slices, how many slices are you going to end up with? Draw the picture, here's my one pizza. I cut it into thirds, how many pieces am I getting there? 80? 3. And they might ask you this, so what's 2 divided by 1/3? 2 pieces cut into 1/3 slices there. Luke?
6.
6. 3
9.
divided by 1/3. How about this? Here, let's see if anybody got this. What if I took one pizza and divided it into 2/3 slices? So let's draw the picture of that. And it's gonna be a little tricky for you here. I'm not cutting into the thirds, I'm actually cutting into the 2/3. So it would look like this. This is my 1 2/3 inch piece. I know I get one whole one out of it, don't I? Okay, and then I still have this piece left over. I'm gonna get one whole one, and then what fraction of 2/3 is this? Maddie?
1/3.
Nope. Lance? Nope. This, by the way, I took out 2/3, so this piece has to be what fraction? This piece is 1/3. 1/3 is what part of 2/3? I can take one whole 2/3 out of it plus a half of another 2/3 out of it. So 1 divided by 2/3 is 1 and 1/2. Now, doesn't that just blow your mind? Do not worry if you don't get that, because in the next couple days I'll tell you the easy way to do that, where you don't have to think about cutting things into pictures, but it's good to understand why that is. Yeah, we might not. We might kind of stop there. Let me see if they ask you any questions. How about this? They ask you this question: how many 1/6 are in 1/2? Now, let's write this out. How many 1/6 are in 1/2? You have to be a little careful with math. If I were to write this out with numbers, how would it look, or what would it look like? How many 1/6 are in 1/2? And let me give you your choices. You're either going to say this: it's either 1/6 divided by 1/2, or it's 1/2 divided by 1/6. Those are two different things. Which one is true? Which one does this? Is this one or this one? here's where I'll tell you this a bazillion times. If the fraction part of the problem confuses you, put whole numbers in it and see what that would be. In other words, instead of saying this is 1/6, say this is 2. And say that this is 8. If I asked you how many 2's are in 8, how would you write that out? What division problem? How many 2's are in 8? How would you write that out as a division problem? Brianna? Correct. How many 2's are in 8 means how many 2's are in 8. So it's not that, it's how many 1/6 are in 1/2, but the 1/6 still has to go in the same place as the 2 went. So which one comes first, the 1/2 or the 1/6? The 1/2. This is the way you write it. So don't think that just because the order up here is this one's first, that one's second. You have to think about it a little bit. Now the question is how many 1/6 are in 1/2? Looking at the circle, I have a half of a circle. And if I think about cutting the circle into sixths, how many 1/6 are in 1/2? Well, here's a question, how many 1/6 are in 1? 6. So if this was a whole circle, there would be 6 in it, but I only have half of the circle, so there it is, Molly. 3. Amen to that. There are 3. If there is 6 in a whole circle, then in a half a circle there'd have to be a third, or 3 of them. Okay, Jaden, don't get too lost. It's just the way it is. Fractions can be awful confusing. Like I said, if you don't quite get that, that is